Here, down. A bit back. Okay, I'd like to introduce you to Glenn Perry. Glenn's a very skilled martial artist based down in Leominster in the UK. He has a full-time martial arts centre. Okay, and the details of that martial arts centre for anybody who lives in that area wants to train with Glenn will be on the DVDs at the end in the credits so that you can see his website address, etc. We're going to start looking into the principles behind Chin Na. The first disc is really looking at the introduction into what Chin Na is, okay, and not just what Chin Na is, but how to enhance each and every technique. In the first disc, we're not going to go technique specific. We'll be going more into that as we start going through the different DVD sets. What we're going to look at is the enhancers that make a technique work. First and foremost, out of everything, the most important thing is to get your feet right. I know that might sound daft when you're talking about grabbing hold of somebody, but irrespective of what art you do, whether you're doing a striking art, whether you're doing a manipulation or a joint locking art, okay, the feet are most important. So as I say, I'm not going to be technique specific at the moment, but we need to understand what makes a technique work. So from here, I'm just going to show you, as I say, we're not looking at any particular technique, I'm just going to put a joint lock on. We'll talk in detail more about this later. If I point my feet in the wrong direction, i.e. point my feet outward, I'm not doing any specific joint lock, I'm just going to apply pressure, okay? I'm just going to tweak. If I apply pressure, Glenn gives me some resistance and he can take that within reason, okay? He can take that amount of pain, I'm applying a bit of pressure. And yes, it's going to move him and I can make the technique work. I'm not doing the joint lock correct, I'm just showing you the principles first. Now, if I point my feet in the direction I want the power to go, this is the key. So from here, I want my power to go from me to Glenn. So I adjust my feet. So my feet are pointing directly toward Glenn. Now watch the difference. Same technique, my legs are straight at the moment, and we're going to look at these enhancers. I'm not doing the joint lock entirely correctly at the moment because we're not looking at this. We're looking at this as how this increases my strength and my correct body mechanics. So I've got the position, I've got the lock on here. Okay, my legs are straight and I tweak it this time. Now see the difference and very little effort. Now, from here, if you notice, that was just purely me turning that foot in, and I've not even got the technique on properly yet. So every time you sort of add a technique enhancer, it compounds, it makes it more and more and more effective. Now, if you saw how fast Glenn went down, so what's the difference here? Foot out again. Here, I do this. I bring my foot forward. He does this. Now, if I sink my centre of gravity, so I bend my knees basically, and my feet are pointing forward, and then I tweak, he drops a lot faster. Okay? Yeah. So what you need to understand is that the mechanics and the position of the body as to how to make the techniques work. And straight away, purely by me adjusting my feet to point toward the target or point toward where I want the power of the joint manipulation to go, makes the technique work better. When I sink my legs, okay, I sink or I root, it makes my foundation much stronger, which means I've got a base to drive my energy forward into the person. Other things, there's many, many different elements that we need to look at, all right? And again, we're just going to look at the different principles for a joint manipulation as well. Any time, and we'll look at a different technique this time, any time you start manipulating a joint, you need to take the slack out of the joint. So if I were to grab, just for example, again, not be specific on techniques, but just let's say we're just in a palm lock here, okay, and I've gone into here. If I don't compress that joint fully, and I just partially move it and try and tweak, he's not going to get the optimum effect on the technique. It's not going to lock him out, it's not going to take him down. And any time in any technique there is a gap or looseness in a joint, there's room for the other person to get out of it. So as you apply the technique, you need to compress the joint, okay? Condense the joint up. And basically from here, so I don't know if you can see from here, I'm not just keeping the slack here, I'm compressing it so it's tight, as though I'm squeezing the joint from both sides. Once you compress, most joint manipulations have multiple lines of force. And what I mean by that is, this is a compression where I'm bending to its extreme, so as far as it'll possibly go. To turn the wrist is torsion. So you're torquing the joint, or you're torquing the wrist. However, what we need to do is do multiple lines of force. And by multiple lines of force, what I mean is, you compress, then you torque. See the difference? If I just compress, I get some degree of pain compliance, but it's not fully working. If I just torque, I don't really get a great deal. But if I compress and torque, that's when I get the technique. So it's understanding that any joint manipulation, whether you're bending the wrist this way, whether you're bending the wrist this way, any way you do it, then basically it's understanding that the way you compress the joint and the way you torque it, you've got two lines of force at that point, and you need really a minimum of two lines of force to make it work. So I have compress and I have torque. And that's on these type of joint locks. Again, we're not being specific, but we're looking at how we work it. When we start looking at elbow manipulations, we need two lines of force. The two lines of force, one is pushing through the elbow in this direction. So I'm not just holding here and pushing here, okay? That's not going to work, okay? What we're doing is I've got this coming toward me, so this is one line of force. I've got this one going away from me. This is my other line of force. And then that's when you get the technique to work. So again, it's understanding these multiple planes, multiple lines of movement to make the technique work. When you start to work any joint manipulation, okay, a lot of people will try and do an arm bar, for example, and we're going to talk about this later in one of the further DVDs. You grab the wrist and try and push on the arm here. And if Glenn gives me some resistance again, okay, it's a battle of strength. It's his strength against mine. It's my arm strength against his. So what you need to do is understand that if the person's a lot bigger than you, you don't want to be using purely arm strength. You need to be thinking about how you can overcome that strength. And you can do that by using waist movement. So I'm not just using this, pushing and pulling, I'm grabbing, I'm fixing this, and as well as doing a little push, I'm using my waist. Because now, instead of just my arm strength against Glenn's arm, I've got the power of my waist and my whole body. So as I start to do the move this time, you can bring them around no problem because I'm using that arm strength. And as I sink, you can get a much greater effect. All right? It's all about pointing the feet where you want the energy to go. We'll talk about specific points and things later on, so don't worry about the techniques in that respect yet. But we're looking at now, starting linking these things together. So wherever we are, whatever technique we're doing, the feet point where I want to go. If I wanted to just destroy the elbow, my feet point toward the person and I break the elbow. If I want to take the person here to this empty space, and we'll talk about that in a minute, as I do the technique, I move my feet to where I want the energy in the person to fall, i.e. here.